Hi, I'm Malcolm Stern, and in conjunction with my friends John and Sandra Wilson from Online Events, we're creating a series of podcasts called Slay Your Dragons with Compassion. My book of the same name was conceived and inspired by the suicide of my daughter Melissa and the journey that took me on and the internal resources that I found. All of my guests will have a story to tell around overcoming and ultimately thriving through adversity. Special thanks to the band Stairway, Jim McCarty and Louis Chinamo, for the use of theme music from their album Medicine Dance, and my engineer Owen Santiago. I hope you enjoy this series, and thanks for listening. Welcome to Slay Your Dragons with Compassion podcast. I'm Malcolm Stern, and I'm having a wonderful series of guests to engage in some dialogue about overcoming adversity, becoming who they are, and often seeing that our lives have been moulded by the events that have happened in them. Today, I'm very, very happy to welcome an old friend, Yaakov Darling Khan. I've watched his evolution as a very profound facilitator and as a profound human being. And so hopefully we're going to have a great dialogue today. Yaakov, welcome. Hello there.
Thank you so much. A real pleasure to be with you and to be with your audience. Thank you for the invitation.
Great. So our lives don't just happen, do they? So we get born and we do our thing, and then things happen. And I used to believe that the things would happen to bad people, but I was all right because I was a good person until my daughter died, and then I realized that these things happen to all of us. And your life will have been molded. So you've come a long way from your early beginnings. And perhaps you could tell us a bit about what you do first of all, and then what led you into that.
Well, I work as a contemporary shaman, not a word I use lightly, but one that I've been invited to occupy as a role by the indigenous teachers and shamans that I've worked with over the decades. And together with my wife, Susannah, we run a school called the School of Movement Medicine. And movement medicine is an embodied practice that is the result of our 40 years of inquiry, study, and, as you say, making medicine from our day-to-day experiences, including what we call the lead of our personal histories, and doing the work of alchemizing that into gold. And that's the work we offer for people, not just to feel good in themselves, but also to recognize the creative power that they have to make an offering that has value for them, that gives them purpose, that gives them a sense of dignity, and helps them to take everything that's at their back and digest that
Hmm.
and release what's not helpful, but really to make art from the past. And of course, we only teach what we need to learn.
I was
That's
to
very
say
true.
that, yeah, that's great. Yes. But also
Um,
you'll teach what you're in the process, presumably, of mastering in yourself and have
mhm.
traveled through in yourself. We don't arrive as a fully formed package. And I've noticed that I believe that my psychotherapy training started when I had my first clients. All of the training was just preparation for the work.
Well,
And I'm hearing something similar.
absolutely. I mean, I was 23 when I started holding groups, and I was I look back at that young man. I see he had a lot of courage. He was very young, no doubt, in many ways, had a lot to learn, probably thought he knew more than he actually did,
Undoubtedly.
undoubtedly. And, um, as you say, it's the years and years of practice, of repetition, that have molded me into who I am, and really taking my personal history, my ancestral history, and the weights that I was carrying, and making the most of them. And in fact, my whole offering is born of I would say, probably the most difficult experience of my life, which was memory, not even something that happened directly to me, but rather something that I experienced fully as if it was happening to me, but it was really memory, maybe because I was here before, maybe because it's in my ancestral memory. But my work was born of the transformation of the pain of the Holocaust, particularly, and really engaging with that in the best way that I could. And
That's
yeah,
been a fascination for me as well, of course. So coming from the same line, and I can't stop reading books about the Holocaust. I'm constantly sort of upping my knowledge about it. And Thomas Hubel, who's been one of my teachers, talks about intergenerational trauma, and we do carry that through. I believe that not necessarily because it's past lives, but because it's in our family line. But
100%. Yeah, I mean, should I tell you what the
please do. Yes, I was about to ask you that.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. So I was working with a woman called Arwen Dreamwalker, and we were doing some work which was um, really traditional shamanic work, lots of smoke, a candle, and a mirror. And the idea was to look into the mirror, and we had two companions, one of whom was my wife, Susannah, another, um, a dear man who was also a psychotherapist called Nick. And they were sitting behind me at my shoulders. And the idea is you look into the mirror through the smoke and just concentrate on allowing what has not yet been seen to become visible. And as I was looking into that mirror, I had an experience which I think in modern in modern psychotherapeutic terms, we would say was a re-traumatization. What happened was that, first of all, I saw this slab of stone in the mirror. Then my body froze. I became really like freezing cold. And then I disappeared from any sense of myself. And I was inside the experience of a 5 year old boy who was going down this concrete path into a gas chamber. And I stopped and I saw the guard there. I looked at his eyes. I went in with hundreds of people, some of whom I knew, some of whom I didn't. And I died in that chamber. And it was what was happening in the room was that my body was thrashing all over the place. I was trying to put out the candle. I was screaming. I was completely out of control. I wasn't at all present in present time. I was lost inside that experience. And it took me maybe 3 or 4 days to come back from that memory sufficiently to be able to witness it as something that had happened rather than something that was happening in the present. And working with Arwen, at that time we were working with some Native American traditions. That was her tradition. She was half Cherokee and half Irish. And she asked me to make a pledge across her pipe. Now, the pipe is a symbol of prayer. It's not something that you're going to make a promise over that you're not intending to keep. And
Mm.
my pledge that I made was to do whatever I needed to do to prepare myself to go back to Auschwitz and to dance at that gas chamber for that 5 year old boy, but also for all the children that had died there. And it took me 13 years to prepare myself, to feel ready enough, to feel resourced enough to be able to go. And I went there with a group of, as it happens, German psychotherapists. And we went there during the day to Auschwitz. And I think you've been there, haven't you, Malcolm?
I haven't, but I've been to Yad Vashem. I
Ah,
haven't been to that,
okay.
where they actually have a room that recreates some of
Yeah.
Auschwitz.
Yes. It's a museum, and it's a horrific place. It's not true that the birds don't sing there. They do.
Oh, good.
And I was really happy to see that. But of course, during the day, it felt really, really out of place to dance in that place, and so I really couldn't. So I decided the only thing I could do was to go back there at night, and I went to the gates of Birkenau, which are locked at night, and the Polish guard came out. Now I don't speak Polish, but I basically let him know that I wanted to go in and to pray. and he unlocked the gates. I went there with two women. We went to the rail tracks. I danced at the where the tracks end. I was furious. I mean, full of fury and fiery and praying in Hebrew and shouting and stomping, and then eventually made my way to that gas chamber, and there I drummed and I danced and I prayed for those children, including the one that I had experienced dying. And then as I was leaving, this took, it was a very different place at night. You know, during the day, it's a museum, it's quiet, it's kind of peaceful, it's more like a graveyard. But at night, all those memories are much more alive, and that which hasn't been acknowledged or released is still very much awake. And it was terrifying, but really a very strong experience. And as I was leaving, the guard came towards me, and in that altered state I was in, I saw him as the boatman over the River Styx. So I put my hand in my pocket and I pulled out all the Polish zloty I had. I have no idea how much it was. And I walked up to him and I said in English, "Boatman, this is payment for the souls of these children. Will you accept it?" And he, of course, he took the money and he opened the gates, unlocked the gates of Birkenau, and I came out. And just at that point, it was a very cloudy night. Literally, the clouds parted, and there was one shaft of moonlight. And I said to all those children I'd been praying for, "That's your way home." And I stood like tears streaming. I can feel my body responding to this now, um, watching these children dissolve into that light and be released. And I thought that was it. That was the end of my work with Auschwitz and with that story. But that night I had a very powerful dream, a lucid dream that went on for hours, where I was in a festival called the Phoenix Festival. And there were these posters, these symbols everywhere. And I was like, I kept going up to people and saying, what is this Phoenix Festival? And everyone I asked said, "Well, look, it's your dream." And I could see that there were workshops happening and there was healing happening. There were people from Rwanda, there were people from Vietnam and Cambodia and Darfur and all these places where genocide has happened. And there was a healing space. And then I met somebody who said, "This is your festival, this is your work. It's called the Phoenix Festival. And this symbol that you're seeing is the symbol of your work." You can just see it there above me, actually. There it
Uh-huh.
is.
Yes. Yeah.
And you can see the phoenix at the center there. I didn't know what it meant, but I drew it in the morning. And what I was told was the phoenix is the symbol of every human's capacity, given enough love, resource, and support, to be able to rise from the ashes of their suffering and create a new story. And that was the beginning of our work. At the same time, Susannah had a dream where she heard very clearly, "Your work is to be called movement medicine." And it took us about 4 years then to put that symbol and that title together into our work. And that mandala has 21 gateways, and it now contains all the teachings of movement medicine. It took a long time to bring that through, but that is our work, to offer that to people who have experienced trauma, both as individuals, also as communities. I've done a lot of work in Israel and Palestine. Of course, that's a tragic situation right now. To offer that space where people can acknowledge the suffering that has been, but not remain identified by it to the extent that they feel they need to pass on that suffering to somebody else.
Mm.
And that's the purpose of my life and my work.
Wow. I'm listening with rapt attention because a lot of people will talk about past lives or sort of racial memories or something like that, and it doesn't feel grounded. But in your case, I know that you have dedicated your life to penetrating the veil, to actually seeing behind what's going on or what we see going on the earthly plane, but you can see more than that. And you've worked hard at it. I know you've done things like, was it locking yourself in a box for months going?
I've done all kinds of weird and wonderful things, and that in order, but basically, yes, I've been very disciplined and dedicated to um, bringing through. I was hit by lightning in my 20s, and which is actually a traditional, in some cultures, shamanic initiation. I didn't know that at the time, but it gave me a way of accessing relationship with indigenous shamans, all of whom have more or less immediately said, welcome, we know who you are, we know what you are, we're going to share with you what we can. And your job is not to become like an Amazonian shaman or a Sami shaman. Your job is to translate your experience into medicine that's relevant for the people and the place where you live. And, our core wounding in the industrial world is disembodiment, disconnection, which creates, a separation from heart, a separation from earth, a separation from nature, a separation from self, from each other, from the what we call the unbroken intelligence that we're made from. And so our work is really to help people embody themselves, embody their hearts, embody their consciousness. And that is an ongoing uh, journey. It never stops. I feel I just turned 60, and I feel like new beginning. Here we are again, a new decade. Life looks different at 60 than it did at 50. Priorities shift, and yeah, I feel very committed to, whilst this heart still beats, to being able to make as much offering as I can in the world, because we have a lot of suffering to deal with, don't we?
Well, we do, and I know in your case it's real. It's like I know that this isn't just sort of some fantasy of what you're doing. I think the other thing that impresses me, I was at your 60th party, of course, and that was a beautiful event. Yay, it was lovely, fantastic amount of dancing and great people there.
Mm.
But what I'm really touched by is your relationship with your wife, Susannah. And these things are hard earned. We don't just go, oh, I've fallen in love, now we live happily ever after. And that's been a journey in itself. And you have a true partner, from what I can see. Can you say a little bit about that, as much as you'd like to share about that?
Well, let's start with this, that without my relationship with Susanna, I wouldn't manage to offer 10% of what I'm able to offer. Our relationship, we've come to understand, is the source of our offering, and that if we tend to that space between us, then that fountain of what we have developed is an enormous resource. And because I often say it took me 30 years to really gain the trust of my wife. And it wasn't that she didn't trust me. Trust is not like, oh, I trust you, that's it. Trust is a process. Like,
Mm,
the more we trust, the more we open, the more we're able to see the ways in which each of us in our relationships, and certainly this is true of Susanna and myself, we bring everything into the space between us. If you live with somebody for long enough, you're going to see everything, in not just the things that you fell in love with, but the things that irritate the out of you. And then you have to. There is this opportunity. Either you go on with that um, modern way of relating, which is basically, I feel like this and it's your fault that I feel like this. Or we'd start to do the work of going, I feel like this, and that's my responsibility. These are my feelings. This is what my experience is. You don't make me feel this. And it's been we've been together 38 years. we have, we were kids when we got together, really, in our early 20s. We've been through all different formats of relationship. We were young and experimental and adventurous, and we tried open relationship, and we did all kinds of things, which I'm glad we did them, and I'm
Mm,
glad they're in the past.
lovely. Yeah.
And
That's good.
yeah, because basically any long-term relationship, you're going to have to deal with, if you're alive and well, you're going to meet other people, you're going to feel attracted to other people. This is just part of life if you're alive. Life is, if you're in your body, kind of life is sexy. Life, that's how it is. It feels good to dance. And on the dance floor, things arise. So then how do you manage that in a way which is honest, in a way which is has integrity? And if you don't, then likelihood is you'll end up like so many relationships, having some secret affair, going off down a path with somebody else, falling in love with somebody half your age because they're adoring something about you that your partner doesn't see. All of these things are normal parts of relationship. And the key, and I know Susannah will talk to you about this when you meet her, is what she calls embodied listening, which is often in relationship, we think we're hearing each other. We think we're understanding each other, but usually we're not.
Mm.
Usually we're hearing what we expect to hear. And we're already in conversation preparing our response whilst the other person is speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we are super blessed, but as you say, it's not been a fairy tale. It's been hard work, and there were times when we really felt that our relationship um, was coming to an end, and you know, we really walked along that edge for a long time. And I think the key for us has been love can't exist without honesty. So if there's a part of the heart that's hidden, and consciously hidden, as in I'm keeping secrets from you, there's no way that the intimacy between you can develop, and therefore the sexual connection between you. Now, my belief is that the longer you're together, the better the sex should be. And that only happens if you develop intimacy. And the relationship that we have now, I've never read about it anywhere, like the level of intimacy and um, nourishment and spiritual connection we have through our sexuality is it's the source of everything good in our lives. Because in that meeting between, in this case, a man and a woman, where there is honesty, genuine intimacy, the the sexuality is sacred. It's divine. It's a space of prayer. It's making love. Like, to make love means to make something that wasn't there before.
Mm.
We're making love that wasn't there before, and that's an offering. That's part of the song of humanity on this planet.
Yeah, I've often sort of mused on the fact that sex goes the entire spectrum from being the most violent, vile thing we can do with another to being something that transcends normal reality, where in fact, the two become one,
Yeah.
effectively, is what the mystics
Yes.
say. And
Yes.
which I've experienced at times. I'm sure you are experiencing with Susanna from what you're
Mm,
saying.
mm,
But I think those things are hard earned. I think what you've named about the building of trust and the essentialness of honesty and integrity within a relationship,
yeah.
and also being willing to really meet another with all of their warts and all of the sides that you may not love, takes
Yeah.
some doing.
It really does, and it's ongoing. It's not that we live in a happily ever after world. If you live with somebody, bound to be times when you irritate each other. We have in our living room, we have these martial arts gloves, these big pads that you can put your arm through, and boxing gloves. So every now and again, because it's we recognize that fire needs to be expressed, and if it's not, then that fire will go out. We look each other in the eye. You know, Susannah, I put these on, and Susannah looks me in the eye, and she's like, bam, bam, bam. I'm like, yeah, come on, come on, give it to me,
Great.
come on, come on. And then, okay, after she's had her turn, it's my turn. And because we know we can't and won't hurt each other with that protection, um, we can express that fury in a safe way. And that often leads to the waters of the heart, to the tears, that to the sadness that we experience as human beings. There's a lot to be angry about. There's a lot to be afraid about. There's a lot to be sad about. And I think a healthy relationship or a healthy spiritual practice makes space for the heart. And yeah, that's our ongoing work. And you know, I would say I shed more tears now than I've ever done in my life. Um, I feel more than I've ever done in my life. That's not always a lovely thing. It's not.
It's not, but interesting. I did a workshop with Ramdas many years ago, which was there were 40 therapists in the room at Grimstone Manor in the olden
Right.
days,
Oh,
and he did a meditation on grief, and half the people were on the floor sobbing and crying, and I'm sitting there quite smugly feeling, well, I haven't got a lot of this going on, and then he turned to the rest of us who were sitting there unmoved, saying, "And your grief is your inability to touch your grief." So actually, when I hear that you're actually dancing with your grief as well as with the other parts of your life, and you've become very successful in what you do, and you've earned it, and you've really sort of invested in who you are. There's a power in that as well. But I think
yeah.
one of the things, Yaakov, that most touched me, and also your response to it as well, was then Susannah's father got too old to be able to look after himself, and you moved him into your house, and you did that seemingly without any thought. And I went, God, I'm so impressed with that, Yaakov. And you said, I wish I were able to say that's the offering of my heart, but it's difficult. And that was I felt really comfortable with that because I thought, oh, well, you know, you're either a saint or
Yeah.
what's going on?
Well, you know, Susanna will say about her papa that he was a very wonderful man and a very difficult man, as I am, as we all are. You know,
Yeah.
we
Yes.
all have our difficult sides, and for sure, he lived in our house for 7 months while we actually did up this room that I'm sitting in now, which was his home. There's a little kitchen and a bathroom, and this was his space. So he was able to cook for himself, and you know, we were very blessed with that. But when he was living in the house, it was very challenging for him as well. I mean, it was a culture shock for both of us, and but we really learned in the 2.5 years that he was here to love and respect one another. And you know, we were very, very different human beings, different politics, different beliefs, different spirituality, but we really were able to bridge that divide. And I'm really pleased I did it, that we did it.
Mm.
There was no, it was a choiceless choice. There wasn't, you know, it wasn't like I could have said no, and lived feeling okay. The yes was obvious, and then the work that came from that was was actually of great benefit to him and to me, and of course to Susanna. And it's one of the things that really built a next layer of trust between Susanna and myself, because she saw there were difficult conversations I had to have with him. Like, you know, he'd lived by himself since his wife had died, and he'd lost some of the, let's call them, social graces
Yes.
of living with other people. And so you know, he often would, the way he spoke to Susanna, one time he spoke to her in such a way, and I just went to him and I said, if you ever speak to my wife like that again, you'll be moving into a home. And
Wow.
and 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 then he said, oh, can you, he was very unusual in as much as he actually said, I want to know if there's something difficult. And I explained to him exactly why. And he listened and he thought about it, and then he came back with an apology to Susannah. And it was, we had lots of those things. He also challenged me about things that, of course, I was unconscious about in the way I was with him. And
Mm.
as I said, slowly we built this sense of respect and love, born of honest, real conversation. I think that's is the thing that seems to be the thread of what we're talking about, which is, in spiritual work, there's such a pressure to be compassionate, to be kind, to be nice, to be all of those good things, that when we're not feeling like that, often we deny it, ignore it, try to bypass it, and that's deadly to any form of genuine connection with spirit. Like genuine connection with spirit comes from being honest and responsible for what we're feeling and finding ways of owning and making use of and being fascinated by the weathers of the heart rather
Mm.
than, yeah, this is the good stuff, that's the bad stuff, I'm spiritual, I don't have anything to do with that. Deadly.
It's true. Well, I mean, it's really lovely to, we're coming towards the end of our podcast, but it's really lovely to sort of hear your story and to watch, I've known you probably since the 1980s, I think. So it's a long time when we were both young. Well, you were younger than me. So now I'm older than you. So, so
Oh.
but it's really lovely to sort of connect with you and to hear you. And I know that you are walking your talk. I'm not saying you're a super evolved human being who never gets anything wrong, but you're
No.
walking your talk and you're in practice, and you have been for as long as I've known you. So
Mm.
I always end with one question, which I don't tell people beforehand because I want it to come spontaneously, which is, what's the dragon you've had to slay? What's the difficulty you've had to overcome? The main thing to be who you are.
Yeah, that's really, really a good question. The thing that comes immediately is my the dragon I've had to slay is what I took on about how masculinity was the problem that we all had to deal with in the world, and that masculinity was the cause of the problems in the world, and therefore my masculinity was wrong in its essence, in its being. And the thing I've really had to slay is that thought process and learn to trust, love, and thoroughly enjoy my masculinity and to learn what it is. And this might be somewhat controversial, but I would say that the greatest achievement of my life is that Susannah lovingly and with great heart loves to call me her patriarch. And we are working with bringing the archetype of the positive patriarch back into the realm of human possibilities for everyone. Patriarch means original foundation, original structure, like the skeleton.
Yes.
And so I would say that's been the biggest thing, to own the power and the heart and the sexuality of my masculinity. And that's been an ongoing process, and no doubt it will continue.
Fantastic. That's really great. And this, and I know you've worked with tens of thousands of people as well in movement, and you've touched people's lives. And I think the more we work on ourselves, the more we are able to offer others, obviously, as well. So I'd like to thank you so much for sharing with us here on the podcast, and we'll meet up soon, hopefully.
I hope so, Malcolm, and thank you so much for your invitation and for this conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed being with you, as I always do.
Thank you, Yaakov. Likewise. Cheers
Thank
then.
you. Bye.
Bye.